What's up, Otakus? Happy Superman Day. This is going to be a really exciting Otaku Weekly because I get to talk about my favorite character um, of all time. I mean, really, across, I think, um, any movie, this goes beyond comics. Like, if you just talk about my favorite, like, fictional character and story, Superman ranks atop them all. Um, I consider Superman better than, in terms of preference, better than like Star Wars, Star Trek. These are all things like IPs I like. Hey, what's up, fanboy? Happy Superman Day to a fellow, Superman fan. Um, and we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into a specific moment in time because we always cover we always flash back to a specific time and then kind of cover the comic book, the music and movies that were coming out at this time. So I guess we'll kind of start there, and we'll get into it. Um, so as you know, I try to put up the a short um, right before I hop on live. Usually, I try to do it in the morning before I found the Adam Hughes variant. Noel Harlow. Okay, cool. That's nice. I know you and Lady Prime went to the comic book shop today. How was that? You guys pick up some good stuff? Um, Ratio variant. Oh, for Superman 710. Okay, cool. Nice. Is that the is that a Supergirl? Is that a Supergirl variant? I'm trying to think. I'm looking it up. What's the cover on that? Super 10 Adam Hughes. I mean, if it's Adam Hughes, it's going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be Supergirl. Oh, it's just. Is that it? Oh, okay. It is Superman. It's just Superman. Wow, that's nice. Yeah, it's weird to see Adam Hughes do like um this style of. Is this the comic book? That is a beautiful cover there. Yeah, it's weird to see Adam Hughes like do like things outside of like good girl comic art, right? Because he is a great artist. He's not just um reserved to. That's a nice cover. Um yeah. I picked up for Don. Well, yeah, that's a great deal. Hey, Christina, how you doing? All right, so we got some people in here. We got some. Um, I hope Superman fans in the house. I know Fanboy's a big Superman fan. Hope you are too, Christina. Because it'll be extra special for those who really appreciate Superman. But even if you don't, hopefully, even if you don't love Superman, I'm hoping, we'll have a good time just talking about, um, the Man of Steel. Yeah, $1.76 for any comic book is a great deal, but especially when you get like a ratio variant by one of the greatest comic book artists today, that's pretty special. People forget Adam Hughes has been around a long time. It's not he's doing a lot of popular modern stuff just throughout. But he's an artist that was got his start when I was collecting back in the day. So he's just been a for me, lifelong artist that I've enjoyed over the years, and he's definitely, I think, he's always been a great artist, but I think he's found his sort of niche in again, the good girl cover art, because yeah, I mean, everybody loves his for example, Supergirl, Wonder Woman, uh, things of that nature. So that's awesome. Nice pickup, man. Yeah, again, looking forward to you and Lady Prime stream tomorrow morning. Um, Seeing what the cover. What's the theme for the cover battle tomorrow? Give us a little preview. Dean Cain, yes, and I went to Cleveland Con and met two of them. Ooh, cool. Dean Cain, yes. That's right. There was a bunch of I think all the super uh, men, the actors who have played Superman recently they were on panels for various events. I think Cavill was the only one that was missing, right? That is really cool. I would have loved to sit on that conversation. Um, that's the kind of stuff that's really exciting. All right, so we're getting, it's Superman Day. Obviously, we have to cover Superman. So we are going to, in my comic book collecting era, talk about the biggest Superman book moment event of my collecting era. And probably even, I don't want to say it's the biggest because you're talking about like almost a 90-year history for the character, but it definitely sent shockwaves through the entire country when this was announced, and we'll get more into it. But let me just start by showing you the short. So we're talking about January 1993. All right, so that is Dr. Dre's Nothing But a G Thing off his album, The Chronic. The Chronic, it came out in December of 1993 and like was an instant like classic. When that album dropped, I was in my freshman year at college. So, it was again, like I think um, toward the late 80s, early 90s, you were seeing uh, uh, sort of a musical cultural revolution happening especially for Gen Xers, right? A Gen X led youth movement that was prominent. What was prominent in this movement was the rise of Black culture, hip hop music. What's up? Daddy's doing live stream. You want to say hi to the people? All right. Good night.
Good night.
That's my son. And he's going to go to bed. He just kind of was like, I guess, wanting to see what I was doing. But yeah, it was really exciting time. But again, it was being led by um, black youth culture. So hip hop culture, sports, surprisingly, because you had the rise of the NBA, Michael Jordan, and the popularity of basketball as well was kind of fueling all of this. There was Air Jordans, Spike Lee, and his movies around, you know, uh, what it was what life is like in his like Harlem, New York, his like where he grew up. So it was just sort of a renaissance for uh, R&B, hip hop, and Black culture, particularly around, again, this new movement in youth culture. So it was strongly linked to what young people were listening to and doing and getting into. And again, when Dr. Dre dropped the Chronic, it basically like launched his solo career because he was previously, kind of associated with NWA, but it also launched the uh, legendary career of Snoop Dogg, and those that duo again just they just killed it with that album. But anyway, it coincided with uh, the death of Superman, and so um, it's interesting because when you hear people say, "Where were you when you heard that Kennedy got shot?" Or "Where were you when you heard the news that the Twin Towers, um, that night that when you heard of the news of the plane crashing into the first tower, right?" Um, it's just one of those like moments where you recall where you are and what you're doing when you heard the news. Well, I was actually hanging out with a bunch of um, people from my neighboring dorm, and we were just kind of hanging out, kind of watching TV and just talking. I think some of us were just um, kind of in little groups and stuff, but we had the TV on in the background, and nothing, radical going on. We're just all kind of relaxing, and I think it was the weekend when the news dropped. But then this news story came on, and really, I don't think too many people got that noticeably like interested in the story. They're just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Well, they're killing off Superman. But when I heard the news, I was like, what? Kind of like I kind of knew what was going on in the comic books at the time, but this was leading up to, again, the death of the Superman issue, and they had just announced, yeah, we're going to kill off Superman. And that got a lot of interest. So it was prior to the release of this comic book. It was probably months before this comic book dropped. So we're talking about like winter of 1992 is when I heard the news. But when the news dropped, I I just remember being in that room with all these people who didn't seem to care, but I was like, I cannot believe they're going to kill off my favorite character. But I also knew in the back of my mind, like, how are they going to do this? I was curious on how they were going to do this, and that would there be a permanence to it? Because if you know anything about comic books, like characters will die and they'll find a way to resurrect them. And of course, that's what happened. So again, I wasn't angry, or I wasn't like crying or anything. I was just kind of like shocked and dumbfounded. And then it definitely got me like focused on um, following this storyline. This storyline was, it was written by Dan Jurgens. I think Jerry Ordway had a big uh, he was also one of the writers, and he had a big influence on um, the course that they were going to take. And I think he's the first one that suggested, what if we take this ailing character and just kill him off? And what he meant by that was Superman sales had dropped to probably its all-time low, and we're talking about a character from Action Comics 1 that had really carried the comic book hobby industry, led sales for much of its history, and then again started to see a decline right around the mid 80s. and that continued into the early part of the 90s, 1992, 93. Some of it was, I think, just ambivalence to the character. There wasn't anything new or refreshing about the character, even though, they're coming off a live action Dean Kane, Terry Hatcher adventures of Lois and Clark, right, which was a huge hit TV show. Um, but, it was kind of like, um, I think in the comic books, Superman got overshadowed by Batman, got overshadowed by what was going on at Marvel with all the great characters and stories there. Um, and they just tried to, I think they tried to breathe life into a new volume of Superman by giving a modern story, but they kind of botch. I've covered this in my past videos why I think the Byrne Superman did not. It was a great story, but it was not action driven. It was more just like story and character and relationship driven. Um, so it just kind of lacked the pop that some of these other comic books had. And then you add to the mix Image Comics. Image Comics came around, and people were just going bonkers, trying to get, um, like Spawn, Wildcats, and that really dropped. Just cut the market share. It cut the market share of DC, cut the market share of Marvel, and created this new player in the industry that had just strong sales from the get-go, and created sort of a world storm. So yeah, on top of lagging sales, Image, debuted in 1992, and that further cut into Superman's popularity and sales. And so it got to a point where like the creators were like, this is a character we all passionately care about. How do we get people to care about him again? And that's kind of where we are in 1993 with this announcement. Um, they they went full blown like, let's just blow it up and um, get people interested in this story. And boy, did it generate a lot of interest, and it drove up sales. Superman was back on top, but again, for the all the wrong reasons. People wanted to know, okay, I care about this character. What's going on? Why are they killing him off? JC, welcome. I love Superman, but I am one of a few tired of making his stories cheesy. I love the storyline back in the 90s, like a murder mystery, a killer out for Clark Kent and his loved ones. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Um, I think they did brilliantly lead up to uh, the introduction of Doomsday. There's a lot of think of more than the interest in how he dies, how Superman dies, is they the interest was around who is this Doomsday guy, right? Well, what they keep teasing him because they were teasing him right up until the big battle, and it was creating this like kind of stir. Okay, wait, we know this Doomsday guy is coming, and we can see he's pretty strong, and that he's you know that they just keep teasing, like that he's trying to break out of this, you know, containment area, and it just piques the interest, right? And then boom, he just breaks onto the scene, kind of in this weird suit, and then eventually, as they're fighting, he gets revealed. His true, like, image gets revealed, and that's kind of what I think people, at least comic book fans, were really, um, what they were just kind of rallying around, getting more details about this. And the thing is, they didn't really create many detail. Doomsday up until he starts fighting is still like a mystery. We just don't know um, the background of this character and what his capabilities are. All we know is like, he's this sort of like killing machine. And, he's got his sights set on Superman because Superman's trying to defend um, the planet Earth. So Brandon Ruth was underrated. I did enjoy that Superman Returns a lot. I thought they did a really great job. The casting of Kevin Spacey as Lex was spot on. That movie should have gotten more love, but again, I think there's this cultural apathy toward Superman that's existed for, I want to say, since the late '80s. I always point to um, Frank Miller doing the Superman character a big disservice in The Dark Knight Returns by making him this like, they portray him as this patriotic Boy Scout who, at the end of the day, uh, would rather serve you know, the U.S. government than do what's right. And that was never. I don't know why he wrote the character that way. It was a huge disservice to Superman, but it also created a new arc that people kind of viewed him through, at least in the comic book community, I think. And it's just taken a long time for people to like um, see him as what he used to stand for, right? Which was just the defend, like the person who would defend Earth at all costs. The humanity's hope, the um, the hero, right? I mean, it's cliche, but he's the hero that all of us um, look up to and deserve. That's right. That's another good point. Yeah, there's all these great shows. Um, I remember another really cool album was Arrested Development. That was a great album. A lot of good albums from that '92 year. Diggle Planets came out. Arrested Development came out. Um, Cypress Hill, Beastie Boys were big. Um, Ice Cube came out with Predator. I mean, there's just a lot of good music. And then you delve into R&B, and R&B was kicking too. So just a lot of great youth pop culture around um, what a lot of great black artists were doing at the time. No worries. Yes, Far Side, Diggle Planets, all around this period for sure. Um, so we were great times indeed. Yeah, uh, you know, they were great times because I was in college. It was really the first time I was um, on my own, like navigating life on my own. I was living in the dorms my first year, met a bunch of great people, many of whom I'm still friends with today. But the thing about my school is that a lot of people were from different places. So they're not like people local to me, they're actually just spread out and in different parts of the world and the country. So, but I recently caught up with one of my friends this past just a couple months ago. Yeah, this was during the Taylor Swift tour here, and he had come out here to visit, and we caught up. It was great, but yeah, it was definitely like a time where a lot of change, a lot of positive change. It felt like was happening. The economy was pretty strong. This is the advent of the internet. The internet was kind of starting up around this point, and then you had all these browsers pop up, and that really got the internet going. Hey, Katie, what's up? And yes, K-pop is in the house. Katie, one of our favorite community members. Thanks for joining. Miller's portrayal necessarily made him follow orders like mindless Boy Scout, but you have to realize the president is appointed by the people and speaks for the people. So he was following. Yeah, I think that's the angle that Miller was playing ultimately. Like Superman, Superman serves the values of America, right? Um, and so he was going and fighting wars and being a political puppet for America's values because he is an American at the end of the day, right? Clark is um, like most of us, right? Just he's from a small town. he grew up with a small town values. He just has more power than everybody else on the planet. He's just the strongest thing in the universe. So yeah, I again, but the thing is, I that's not how I think ultimately Superman would not just want to defend Americans and American values. I think he would want to defend uh, uh, humanity, all humans, not just chosen ones. So that, in that sense, Miller does do him a disservice, and he does make the character um, rather, you know, one-dimensional in that sense. What's up? Okay, so yeah, let's focus on this comic book. This comic book, I've got a newsstand edition here, but there's multiple printings of this comic book. It is the second best selling comic book. 5 point, I think 3 million copies were sold. So I mean, it is a beloved book. And this is another book where, like, again, this was kind of as the comic book bubble was, growing. A lot of people were in the hobby. A lot of people were collecting. And when they made this announcement, everybody thought, wow, the death of Superman. This is a huge key issue. I'm going to get multiple copies. I mean, this thing hit upwards of like $50 for like just a copy, right? And it had sold out pretty quickly. I remember trying to get an issue of this, and it was no longer cover price at my LCS. They had it, I think, listed for like $25, and it just instantly became like, okay, like a wall book, right? Like, okay, that's something I have to save up for, or like, you know what I mean? Like $25 for a comic book back in the 90s, that was still a lot for a book. But yeah, of course, this dropped. It's like it's a dollar bin book now. Maybe if you pay $5 for it, I think that's kind of where maybe the value is. I know the book value is a little higher, but I don't know anybody wanting to pick this up for like $20 um, because there's just so many copies of it. You really should not overpay for this book. But this book, when it came out, was basically a splash page. And what we mean by a splash page is like a full page panel, or just like a full, 2-page, one image type format. And so literally every page is just like a big image and a big action image, and everything is just larger than life. And it's almost like a silent issue. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's just panels, like basically images, right? Just a series of images where you're getting um, the sense that things aren't going to turn out well for either. It's just a colossal battle, right? Um, but it's one where Superman just fights to the death. It's a death match, and ultimately he does stop Doomsday, but uh, it's kind of one of those like moments where there's this sort of like double hit, and like boom, like Doomsday falls, and then Superman. You think, oh, okay, Superman won, but then he's not moving, and Lois realizes she's watching. Every people in the area are watching them battle. They're just destroying everything in their path, and just rubble everywhere. Metropolis is destroyed, and anyway, at the end of it, both of them perish in this epic battle, and then um, that starts the funeral for a friend arc, and then ultimately the introduction of four new Supermen, and a lot of mystery around these four Superman characters, but they're kind of revealed, and their relationships and who they are slowly get revealed. So it was just this great time. It was a great time, this quote unquote Jurgens run, because he kind of led this entire arc. Was a great time for the character, the titles. There was Superman, Action Comics, Adventures of Superman, and Superman the Man of Steel, along with crossover DC titles that were delving into this the death and the funeral, and sort of the aftermath. So, yeah, a very pivotal time in comic book history. It also kind of signaled the death of the comic book industry, because after death, it was just sort of like it's kind of like this was sort of a last hurrah in this 90s comic bubble, and then after the death of Superman, you just slowly start to see people realize, yeah, this is not an investment. The comic books that Image was creating, it wasn't holding its audience, so people started to lose interest in those comic books, and overall, interest in the hobby uh, couldn't sustain itself, and the bubble burst, sales dropped. People like myself, I left the hobby in around 96, 97. So you just saw an exodus of people, because there were so many things in the 90s that were going on. It just felt like comic books wasn't enough to hold your interest. There was just so many other things happening, especially around the internet, video games, again, movies, music, all of these things were coalescing, and you've only got so much money to spend per month. And I just remember, like, laptop computers were like getting better and better. Cell phones were coming out toward the end of the 90s. Um, the internet was just taking up all of our attention and time. People were learning how to build websites, and like just having a new channel of connection and communication. It just seemed like comic books had reached sort of a tipping point, and really had the legs kind of swept up from under them, and didn't really recover until I mean, it's never recovered from the 90s, right? It's still, um, I think, sales wise, it'll never reach those heights. But I think the industry's diversified. Definitely, comic sales have come back up. We have new blood into the hobby, so it still survives, and it's still healthy today. But boy, did it take a big kind of beating in the 90s, and um, it was an interesting time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another thing that you had all these like comic books themselves were just so diversified. It wasn't no, it, people were no longer interested in like X-Men, Superman, and these things. They were more like getting into adult oriented, themed comics, trade paperback, different, different types of graphic novel formats. You saw the rise of, uh, Vertigo and trying to remember the other like adult label comic books. But what's up? Awesome one. Hey, thanks for joining, man. So I really want to focus on Superman for a minute. It's Superman Day, and I think all of you who follow social media today was noticing a lot of Superman content. In fact, DC kind of launched, or DC Studios, I should say, launched a hashtag, and I don't know if anybody's done it, but it's basically like hashtag look up something, like look up look up at this or something, and it was just saying post your Superman story, post your Superman like moment or a tribute, like why you like this character, or what he means to you. And what's interesting is how far we've come with this gun project. Now, if you go back and watch my video from like, I want to say almost 2 years ago, when the gun project first got announced, I was excited, but I made a prediction at the time. I made a bold prediction, and it's coming true. It is coming true. And my bold prediction was that the gun project would reinvigorate interest into this character, and it would reignite the character, the IP, for a new generation, and do it in a way that would bring the character fully back to the fore of not only comic books but popular culture. And I made this bold prediction because I knew the strength of the story and the IP. I just had faith that this character would be something any generation, whether it's the generations prior or the generations that have followed me, it's just such a universal character, especially here in America, because there are just so many American values tied to the character, Christian values tied to the character. Really, Superman is a metaphor for Christ, right? He's the only son of the Father Jor-El. The Father Jor-El sends his only son to protect humanity. And he comes as a baby, and he's adopted by these human caretakers, and he's raised. He dies, and then he rises again. So I don't know what more. I don't know what can draw him closer to a Jesus Christ analogy than those events. Like it's literally the story of Christ. And what's interesting is, he grows up in the Midwest. He grows up on a farm, and he grows up in this sort of like pocket in time when, and we're talking about the modern origin of Superman. Okay, I'm not talking about how he was introduced in the comic books, even though it kind of mimics that, because his origin story is really developed in the 50s, right? During the golden age. But we're talking about that time, the golden age of comic books, or I should say the post-war boom of the United States, when the United States became a world power after World War II. You saw a lot of, you know, uh, essentially power and wealth come to the country. It was a leader in terms of um, just stance in the country, right? Everybody looked up to the United States as this like democracy. It really was the golden age of this young country. And Superman kind of represented all that in the pages of this comic book, and throughout even the Silver Age, Bronze Age, right? He was just always the guy there who would stand in front of you when there's bullet fire, the guy going into, you know, um, the crisis for, head first, um, flying into danger, and again, fighting to his very last breath to stop evil. Um, and again, this I hear a lot of people say he's so boring. And okay, this is before. This was like 2 years ago when I made this prediction. Um, Part of what drove me nuts was the comic book community all ignoring Superman, right? The history of this character. The reason why you're reading a comic book, the reason there's a Spider-Man, the reason there are X-Men, the reason Marvel exists was because of this character. The popularity of this character drove the industry, drove the hobby. It set a precedent for the tone of these stories. Um, and But when I hear people say, "God, he's just so boring," there's nothing. He's so powerful. Like there's nothing exciting about him when he dealing with the situation. Because he'll come in, he'll save the day, and that's that. Um, and That always drove me nuts because it tells me that they didn't really bother to read the comic books, or if they did, they were more interested in like, you know, maybe kung fu fighting action versus like um, true like mythological, um, you know, stories built around values, core values that really are at the heart of any good story, right? You want to teach a lesson. You want to. And I think we got away from that. I think as a culture, we got away from enjoying uh, stories that were happy, good, had happy endings, where the hero won the day, the damsel got rescued, and some at some point we got sick of that kind of motif, right? We got sick of listening to that kind of story, um, and then we started delving more into like stories that really were kind of like the opposite, um, tragic stories, characters dealing with uh, tragedy, but doing it in a way that maybe is, you know, questionable, kind of like borderline questionable, but um, characters with a lot of baggage, and I'm specifically talking about like, like characters like Batman, Wolverine, right? These are characters that have obvious flaws, but still try to do at the end of the day, they're trying to do the right thing. Versus what Superman stands for. He's just like good to begin with, good to end with. There's not a lot of uh, like moral gray area in that sense. So uh, again, I don't think that when people say he's boring, I get it. It's he's not your maybe cup of tea or whatever. But I disagree with the fact that he's boring. He's not boring. If you look at his story, if you look at the characters built around that, it's just you've got to buy into that family. You got to buy into that uh, period of time. You got to buy into those values um, to really, I think, understand the character first and foremost, and then second, um, be really passionate about what happens to uh, him and the people around him. And so it comes down to that. It's like you can either think he's a boring character, or you can care about him to the point that you don't care that he's boring. And first of all, he's not boring. Um, he's a person caught between two cultures. He's a person caught between two identities. He's a person that has to, for the longest time, had to hide his, uh, not hide, but hide his Kryptonian, or separate his Kryptonian identity from his Earth identity, um, which is just really kind of one identity, right? He's this Kryptonian with a and Kansas. What I don't was it Kansan? Kansasan. He's a Actually, he didn't grow up in Kansas, but I think a lot of people just assume he's from Kansas. Yeah, I think Superman Cavill. I think I don't. I didn't think Cavill Superman was horrible. I thought it was pretty good actually. Um, but to say that Henry Cavill Superman was the best Superman um, negates Christopher Reeve's portrayal. It negates all the great portrayals um, throughout the history of this character. There have been a lot. Um, so, I mean, I just think, this is a character that will continue to reestablish itself. And just getting caught up on one portrayal, one vision, one really story arc. It was what, two movies and a Justice League movie. To get really caught up on those kinds of details um, makes you just a one-dimensional Superman fan. It also dates you as probably millennial. Um, so I just think people need to just get over it. It's like, yeah, no one's denying Cavill Superman was pretty cool, but he's not the only person that can play Superman. Okay, it's like, um, in fact, I think in most recent history, like for me, um, Tom Welling is hands down the best Superman of recent memory. Way better than Cavill Superman. It's because he played Clark as a Smallville high school student, right? Um, and then transitioning into professional career, getting married to Lois, and becoming Superman. So it was just this arc of like a young man becoming Superman, which is essentially what the modern version of the comic book is, and which is why I love Smallville, because it's essentially the homage to Byrne's Superman, which is the modern retelling of uh, the Superman character. So it took 20 years for them to acknowledge like what Byrne did in the 80s was incredible. Jeff Loeb took that and said, we're going to make Smallville. We're going to tell that story uh, season by season and do it in a fun way. Do it in like again, it was kind of like post 90s, new millennia generation. But man, was that series good. And boy, did it have the hottest actress, Kristen Crook, as Lana Lang, hands down. I thought Kristen would have been made a better Lois than Alana, but it worked. It worked. Great. Yeah, being an immigrant also, that's I think, Jim Lee talked about it. Jim Lee talked about how he's a big fan of the 20s animated series, the Max Fleischman Superman. These were animated shorts that were really played as previews or played before the feature film, right? You had a feature film, but you have this sort of like animated short that set up the movie. And this was, um, again, there were a huge series of these like Superman cartoons, and the animation in them, it was color, it was really high quality animation at the time, cell animation. So it was just way ahead of its time. But because it was Superman, there also, there was just this big motivation to bring him to the big screen. Um, so Superman's just in all these iterations have always been sort of um, at the forefront of our cultural imagination from throughout since he was introduced. Um, but yeah, what has me excited was my prediction that Superman would become, again, rise to the top, essentially, right? He'd become the character that people cared about again, the comic book character that people wanted to collect again. Um, and I predicted it, and it's coming true. It's literally like here, and the movie isn't even out yet, and we're at this point already because I've seen so many people post about Superman. I've seen so many people, and we're not talking comic book people. We're talking about like people who could care less about comic books now suddenly caring about Superman, now suddenly talking about Superman, now suddenly wanting to learn and read the books to get a better sense of who the character is. I've seen people in the community be like, I didn't, X-Men used to be my favorite character, but now Superman's my favorite character because they've, it whatever got them to switch. Um, I'm glad to see it. It's literally created this sort of like cultural social media sort of like coalescence around the fact that Superman's great, and we're going to enjoy this movie, and we're going to enjoy crypto, right? All these like really fascinating elements, and that this character is going to revive DC. It's going to be at the forefront of the DC movement, not Batman, but Superman. And it's going to just re-educate people. And I say re-educate because I think everybody knows Superman, right? You know Superman, but to what extent you know Superman, um, that's what it's that question here, right? I recently talked to a Gen Z guy, and he basically, I asked him, like his Superman's not his favorite character, and I really probed him, like, well, why isn't he your favorite character? And he's like, I just never got into him. And I was like, and I said, okay, why? What? I mean, what was your first memory of Superman? He's like, mm, I never really uh, watched too much. He was basically admitting, like, you know what, I don't know too much about him. And I said, did you watch the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie? And he's like, no, but I've seen bits and pieces of it. It looks really hokey. Like the special effects just look dated. I'm like, yeah, because it's like a movie that came out almost 50 years ago, right? Um, I think, but I mean, did you like really watch the movie? Like, did you watch the acting, the story behind that character? And he's like, no, not really. And I really said, you know what, you should really maybe watch that movie, and then maybe watch Smallville, uh, and see if that doesn't change your mind. And he kind of said, yeah, but no, I'm good, right? Uh, so hopefully he'll watch this new Superman movie and he'll convert. Maybe the movie will ultimately get him to be like, well, you know what, Superman's a cool character. Um, he did watch the Cavill Superman, and I think he's kind of in that camp. Like, yeah, the Cavill Superman's great, but he's not my favorite character. And so, um, again, that's what I mean by re-education. Re-education means like making you look at the character and understanding the character in its intended light, and not this sort of like um, sort of casual, like, oh, I know all about that guy, so I'm not even going to bother, like investing time into uh, getting to know the character, or reading a story or a comic book or watching a movie about that character. It's not worth investing my time. It's just a very sort of casual understanding versus like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know that about Superman. I didn't know, these details. What he had, he grew up in Smallville and, had a girlfriend named Lana Lang and had adopted parents and had to navigate, being super powerful while hiding that from his entire community. Just those kinds of details, like, I think when people understand that, uh, maybe that'll bring a little bit more appreciation for who the character is versus, oh yeah, he's the guy who just like takes his shirt off and flies and saves people. It's like, just it adds that additional nuance to his origin story, his background, and why people should care about him. Um, but yeah, again, thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. We're talking Superman, and what it's great to see about Superman Day this year, as compared to years past, is like people are caring about the character again, and I'm just talking about everybody. Um, I just see people. I know for a fact there are people in the community who, where Superman, they've never mentioned them on the chat. They've never mentioned him on the channel. They've never featured any comic books of his on like a comic haul. I'm not going to name names. I'm just, you guys know who you are. You didn't care about Superman. All right. Let's just put that out there. But you're caring about him now. And that's all I care to see. Like, they're picking up Superman books. They're picking up back issue like Silver Age, like Golden Age Superman books are, the sales are rising. Superman's in the top 20, the top 10 lists again. Um, and you've just seen this interest build, uh, particularly from the gun trailer, like teaser. That's when it really sparked the interest. And I'm just sad that it takes like a movie, uh, like a box office, the next box office summer, popcorn movie to get this character the love and appreciation he deserves. It's sad to see that, but um, something's got to do it, right? And I think this is a good rallying point, and hopefully it's just it kicks off, because you know what um, what's his name, uh, Robert Downey Jr. What Robert Downey Jr. did for Iron Man and the MCU and the interest in Marvel, that was all driven by a movie, right? So if Robert Downey Jr. can do for Iron Man and Marvel Comics, I think right now, uh, James Gunn and who's the actor playing Superman? I forget his name. Um, cast to something. hopefully, that this portrayal of Superman, this IP can do for Superman what Downey did for Iron Man. And I'm thinking it'll go way above that because, um, first off, in the little that we've gotten to see about this movie, you can tell Gunn is bringing a very thoughtful, classic approach to the storytelling. Um, and I think anytime you do the storytelling right and then bring in the dynamic action, that lethal combination is gonna uh, push the boundaries of its popularity to new heights and new audiences, and that's what I'm talking about. This whole video is entitled "Superman Rises" on Easter weekend, and I'm being very intentional with the the comparisons here. Um, it's because Superman represents hope, and he's an immigrant who's come, adopted our culture as his own, and identifies as an American, as a person of Earth, person of the our global community, right? And his Kryptonian symbol means hope. He is a symbol of hope for humanity, because he's literally the thing that stands between us and um, eternal pain, eternal uh, darkness, right? So um, that that kind of symbolism, that kind of even though he's a fictional character, to have that as something we can read about, something we can kind of cheer on, something we can um, put our faith into in terms of like, this is a great character. This is a character I care about. This is a character I want to know what happens to him. And that's ultimately what any good IP is, right? You care, you passionately care about what happens to the character. You want to read more about what goes on in the character's life. You want to know what happens with the characters around him. You care about them, the character, the people that he cares about, you care about, right? Um, and Superman is really this sort of like point we all, whatever your background or culture or belief system, um, you can look at that symbol and find something that resonates with you because he again is protecting you from, not from a literal sense but from a idealistic sense, right? Idealistic senses. Here's a guy, he's just powerful. He doesn't have to fight. He could do his own thing, but he is sacrificing his time, his energies to protect us, doing everything in his power to help humanity, to protect humanity, right? That's a really powerful story. So to I mean that's essentially every hero story, but not every hero is Superman. Okay. Yeah, Spider-Man. Yeah, he gains these spider powers, and he, with great power comes great responsibility. And he's this teenager kid in New York, and he cracks jokes and he does all these things. But it's not Superman. It's not Kal-El. It's not Clark. Um, and that's just one example, right? Like, there's just nobody. Superman is just in a class and act in his of his own. He cannot be copied. He cannot be mimicked. And Marvel's tried, right? Marvel's tried their best to like minimize Superman's significance by introducing all these like super powerful characters on their side, but um, still, it's not Superman. And what's really interesting is like all the Marvel legends, when they eventually come to DC, uh, the book they all want to work on at DC is Superman. Jack Kirby, he came over from DC. They asked Jack, "What do you want to do?" "Oh, I want to work on Superman." They give him Adventures of Superman, or Jimmy Olsen's pal Superman. John Byrne came over. "Hey, you got to reimagine DC." "All right, I'm going to reimagine it through Superman." Of course, they're going to give him they gave him the keys to the kingdom, and he ran with it and really put out one of the best uh, modern comic books um, that reimagined his story the way it should have been reimagined. Yeah, it's not the action driven like comic book that most people I think at the time wanted to see. So even me, like I was like I was rather see like Wolverine chop up people with his claws than watch a thoughtful origin story about a guy struggling with his power and identity, right? Or not really struggling, but understanding his purpose and moving forward with it um, in a concerted way, which is what made Superman. There was just no doubt, like this is like the path I'm going to pursue. And it's because I care about the people around me. That includes Lana, that includes Ma Pa Kent, that includes, to some degree, uh, Lois, Jimmy Olsen, all the new people he meets in his new adventures as an adult living in Metropolis. So you just see that transition, right? Um, so, yeah, for me, he stands as a symbol of hope. And right now, there are a lot of things happening in this country that I think, make even the most quote unquote secure of us feel anxiety and uh, worry about. Um, I think a lot of us are just, me included, I think we're just kind of like in denial at this point. Like, you know, with all the talk about the economy, tariffs, prices, inflation, all this, like we just kind of live in this like, if it happens, it happens. I'm kind of powerless to do anything about it. Um, we're kind of all at the it just feels like we're all at the whims of our elected leaders. And I think the fact that Superman's coming out this summer will at least give us a distraction, a good distraction. And whether that gives you hope um, that good better times are coming, or that gives you hope in the middle of a shitstorm as it's unfolding. Um, the important thing is like this symbol of hope is being celebrated once again. It's being talked about. It's in the public eye. It's in public. It's on, at the center of public attention. Um, and again, from a hobby standpoint, from a collecting standpoint, it's at the forefront of comic books once again. And so I hope if you're a comic book collector, um, Superman comics are not expensive. You can go right now to your LCS, dig in the Lois Lane box, Jimmy Olsen's Pal Superman box, the Adventures Comics box, the Superman box, the Action Man Comics box, the Man of Steel box. Uh, just dig in those boxes and you can find so much goodness because it's a 90-year history of goodness. Um, for me, I think when I do, I haven't been buying comic books as of late, but when I have I want to say, the bandwidth to budget, I should say, the bandwidth and the budget to start going to the LCS and buying books again. I'm definitely a focus on Bronze Age and Copper Age Superman because I think that's an era where it was a period of decline for Superman, but it was also some of the better comic book stories in its history because you just had so many like incredible uh, creatives. Really, the top Superman will always have the cream of the crop in terms of creatives working on the title at any given time. Um, and I think the Bronze Copper Age, you see that. Um, Maybe a couple people held on to the Superman mantle for too long, and that's when the character maybe got stale or just um, maybe needed new life. But um, from an artistic standpoint, it's always been peak, uh, peak artistry. From a writing standpoint too, I think you always had the really thoughtful, incredible writers um, that worked on Superman. Again, through that Bronze and Copper Age. So I just really want to get more issues from that era. And again, they're very inexpensive. You're talking, you go there, probably get those books for like $2 a pop, if that. A lot of them are right around the $2-3 range, and so you know, again, mint, you know, high grade copies for 2-3 bucks from that era. It's where I would want to focus my energies, like moving forward. But I picked up a lot of Superman already, so I just feel like that's always the mode I'm in. I'm always in Superman mode, along with other stuff I'm looking for. Superman's always been kind of what I look at, what I look through when I'm at the LCS. Um, and of course, I'm still wanting to pick up more Neil Adams Superman because I think Neil Adams is, even though people say Batman is his character, I honestly think for Neil Adams, for John Byrne, for Jim Lee, all those great artists, their best characters, uh, or the the pinnacle of their sort of work is Superman. Um, so you know, I hope I exhausted Superman in your imagination. David Corn Sweat, yes. Devin Corn Sweat. I got to just get that name down because again, I think he looks the part. Um, he has the good looks. You see, Superman's gonna be good looking, because he's a ladies' guy. Come on, and he looks the part of both Clark and Superman. I love the suit. I think it's New 52 beats the red underwear. So I'm not a hater of the suit. Um, Yeah, I gotta agree. I don't think Cavill Superman was the best. That's just me. For me, it will always start and end with Reeves. Reeves is just the character. Um, for me, I can't speak for any other generation because a lot of, I'm sure people from the '50s think George Reeves is the original Superman, or maybe people from the the millennials think Tom Welling is the Superman. I'm not gonna. I think Tom Welling was played a great Superman, but he didn't really play Superman again. He played Superboy essentially without ever becoming Superboy, right? Um, but for me, yeah, like Reeves just redefined the character as a real, you know, human being portraying, and because we know the character through the pages, but we never saw the character in real life, like flying around and what that looked like in live action. And Reeves was the first one to do it with um, an intelligence and uh, flair that I don't think you can mimic it, and I think that's what Core and Sweat's going to do. You're going to see a lot of parallels between the Core and Sweat portrayal and the Reeves, because I think that's what Gunn is ultimately like. You got to be like this guy, right? You got to be like the Christopher Reeves character. Um, but that's kind of how you have to do it, to be honest. Like you just got to be a new Christopher Reeves for a new generation, and that's what I'm excited to like ultimately see on the big screen. I'm excited to see Superman, but I'm also excited for the Summer of Superman, which is launching now at DC, right? Just all these Superman titles, focus titles. Um, you've got Batman Hush right in the background of the summer too. A lot of things going on at DC, exciting to see, um, which I hope is a real launching point for this the IP, the title, and the character as a whole moving forward. Um, I know Supergirl is, you know, she's up next in terms of where our focus is going to be. So if Superman is a huge hit, Supergirl hopefully keeps that momentum going until we see the sequel or until we see like eventually the Justice League, right? And just again, let let Gunn play in his sandbox. Don't try to kill this thing before we all want to see right what happens, right? Um, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's really support Superman for not for this movie's sake, but for who the character is and what he represents, what he means to uh, our nation, our culture. Okay, um, he's the part of American history, part of Americana that we want to preserve. And even though he's a fictional character, we put so much um, we put so much investment into the stories we love, right? Um, let's make Superman again a story that we love, and that really just takes each one of us to say that out loud and believe it. Like it really literally takes you to be like, you know what? I didn't like Superman, but I'm willing to give him a chance. I'm willing to be a fan of Superman from this point moving forward. Um, and you're saying that as an American. You're saying that as a person who cares about what he Superman represents. Okay, forget about a specific comic book, a specific movie, or a specific like a 40s depiction. Okay, forget about all that stuff. Really look at the core of the story, right? Um, a person who's willing to adopt a new place as his own and defend it. Okay, it's literally love thy neighbor. It's love thy neighbor. And if you believe in that, if you believe in love thy neighbor, then I hope you will love Superman, and you will give. Um, I don't mean you don't have to give James Gunn your money. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you will give the character um, your time, your energy, and your appreciation, right? Just appreciate the character, appreciate the story. Read a comic book. That's all it is. Like just read a comic book, enjoy it, like the character, and just go from there. And that's all. That's all I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to watch the movie. I'm not asking you to pick up a T-shirt. I'm not asking you to do anything other than read a Superman comic book, um, and be passionate about the character, and just understand what the character, who the character is. That's all I'm asking. Understand who the character is, what he represents, and you decide if you care about that. Okay, just decide: do you care about that character? And hopefully, the answer is yes. Um, yeah, again, I said this back 2 years ago when I made the prediction that James Gunn will probably have a hit and it'll bring a lot of people back onto the Superman bandwagon, loving the character again, and Superman will be celebrated and he'll be at the forefront of like pop culture again. And again, that's happened. It'll probably continue to happen, continue to build and continue to grow from this point forward. But it's happened. It's happening now. I saw it. I'm witnessing it today on Superman Day. This level of interest and excitement and positivity around the character. They're literally shouting down the haters, the Cavill haters. So if you're Cavill hating on social media, you're getting shot. You're getting shouted down, which is great to see. But uh, out, beyond that, I also predicted that if the Gun movie bombs, that's not going to change my passion for Superman. It was never about the Gun movie for me. But I do want to see the Gun movie succeed. I do want to see what's happening now continue to happen. And again, my son, I try to get him in Superman. He's not having it, but hopefully the Gun movie, he'll watch it this summer and he'll be like, Dad, can we go buy a Superman comic? I'll be like, yes, son, that we can do. So thanks for listening to me rant. Oh, but by the way, I just want to share some additional some of my favorite Superman comics. And these aren't. I mean, these aren't. I have so many Superman comics. I just grabbed ones that I just kind of wanted to share that I thought were pretty cool. One is this great John Byrne cover here, Action Comics 593, big Barda kiss cover. This is a controversial comic book because there's intimations that Superman's gonna take part in a porno shoot. And then this comic here, if you're a Superman fan, this should be just one of the books on your list of stuff to get. But it's a homage of Superman 1. And that is Action 643, this incredible cover by George Perez, homaging Superman 1. And just homaging the shit out of Superman 1. I mean, that is such an iconic image and cover by the great George Perez. Beautiful. One of my favorites in the collection. And then really the first appearance of the modern Superman. And what I mean by modern, I mean the post first appearance of the post crisis Superman storyline. And that is not on a DC book, but on the page of Amazing Heroes is the preview of John Byrne's Man of Steel. Yeah, preview of John Byrne's Man of Steel. Prior to Man of Steel, that's Amazing Heroes. And yeah, man, Byrne captures the essence there. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think for any comic book creator, you ask them, like what book would you love to work on, and 9 out of 10 of those creators are going to say Superman, because like I just was talking about for the past 2 hours, he's the character. He's the character that we all should care about. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for joining, guys. Join me and Jeff tomorrow night on Double Tiger for another exciting edition. And I want to give a shout out to Roger. Metarog, recently helped improve a lot of my comic books. Well, he is trying to complete the entire Marvel stamp era of comic books. And I think he has a list of books that he's missing. So if you just go over his, I would encourage you to support him. If you don't, that's fine. But if you can and you have the bandwidth to have one of those comic books that he's looking for, please consider, sending him your copy, because he's just a great community member, and I just think we should all help him try to complete this collection. It's something he's been trying to do since he was a little kid. And to be honest, I was shocked that he hadn't completed it, because he has such a voluminous collection. I just thought, if anybody has that, or had the wherewithal to do it, it would be Roger. But I was surprised. No, he has a series of books missing. He has a lot of the books. Just the stamp is cut out. He wants copies where the stamp is intact. And so if you can help him, please take a look at the list and see what you can. He's willing to trade for it. He's willing to, improve your books. Do what he asked you to, either trade for the books, or I think he even said he'd be willing to pay for the books. Or no, he didn't say he'd pay for the books, but he'd go to great lengths to give you value for what you were giving up. But yeah, I actually had one of the books. I don't collect a lot of that Marvel era like he does, so I don't have a lot of that Marvel stamp era books in my collection. And I've intentionally kind of avoided Bronze Age Marvel. Um, I have Bronze Age Marvel in my collection, but it's not like something I go out and actively seek. But when I saw one of the books he was looking for on his list, of course I looked. The first thing I did was I opened up to see if the stamp was there. The stamp was there. So I told him, hey, I'm sending you the book. I'm mailing it out tomorrow. So again, shout out to you, Roger. Thanks for being a great community member and a friend and my mentor in comic books. And yes, Prime Survival gets it. Prime Survival gets it. And help him out if you can. Please just take a look at the list. If you've got that comic book with the stamp intact to spare, or if you want to trade him for something, hit him up and please help him out. So with that being said, again, thanks for it's just great to see everybody here. Hopefully, everybody's here to just check out Superman I said Superman Rises on Easter weekend. It's a pretty compelling title there. Hopefully, this generates some interest in the character and provides some, positive, uh, positive perspective on um, why you should be passionate about him. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.